The sky was never more beautiful. Golden light breaking through clouds, the ocean stretching endlessly below. Perfect wind currents carrying you higher and higher. Your first solo flight. Pure freedom. Pure joy. And 400 miles away, traveling at 45,000 miles per hour. The end of your world. Sometimes the most beautiful moments come right before the worst. Let me take you back 66 million years to the final day of the Cretaceous period. This was the coast of what would one day become North America. A limestone cliff rising 200 feet above the ocean. And on that cliff, in a colony of about 50 nests, lived a community of Pteranodon. We'll call our protagonist Sky. Sky was young, just 4 months old. For a Pteranodon, that was the threshold of independence. She had hatched in early summer, been fed and protected by her parents through the vulnerable early weeks, and had spent the last month learning the basics of flight under careful supervision. But today was different. Today was her first solo flight. The day every young Pteranodon both anticipated and feared. The day you prove you can survive on your own. Sky stood at the edge of the cliff, her wings partially extended, testing the wind. She was still small compared to the adults, wingspan of maybe 12 feet compared to their 20. Her beak was shorter, her crest smaller, her body lighter. But she was ready. Her parents had taught her everything they could. How to read the wind, how to use thermal currents to gain altitude without expending energy, how to dive for fish, how to land without breaking a wing. Now it was time to do it alone. Sky's mother stood nearby, watching. Pteranodon weren't particularly emotional creatures by mammalian standards, but there was something in her posture, a tension, a readiness to intervene if needed, that suggested concern. This was a dangerous moment. Many young Pteranodon died on their first solo flights. A mistimed dive, a sudden wind shift, an inability to pull out of a descent. But it was necessary. You either learned to fly alone, or you didn't survive. Sky took a breath, or the reptilian equivalent, and launched herself off the cliff. The first seconds were pure instinct, wings extended, catching air, body angling to convert the fall into glide, the ocean rushing up below, then receding as she caught the updraft from the cliff face. And then, flight. Real flight. Controlled flight. Solo flight. Sky banked to the right, testing her control. The wind responded to her wing adjustments. She climbed higher, using a thermal current the way her mother had taught her. The colony's cliff became smaller below. The ocean spread out in every direction. It was the most incredible sensation she had ever experienced. Freedom, power, mastery of the air. She called out, a high-pitched cry of triumph. From the cliff, her mother answered back, a sound that might have meant, well done, or be careful, or simply, I see you. Sky flew north, along the coastline, following the route her parents had flown countless times. Below, the ocean was calm, its surface reflecting the morning sky. She could see fish schools moving just beneath the surface. In a few more weeks, she would be skilled enough to dive for them. For now, her parents would still feed her when she returned. But that was fine. Today wasn't about proving she could hunt. It was about proving she could fly. The world below was breathtaking. To the west, inland, she could see vast forests of conifers and flowering plants. In the clearings, herds of Triceratops moved slowly, grazing. A Tyrannosaurus stood on a ridge, surveying its territory. Smaller dinosaurs, dozens of species Sky couldn't identify, went about their daily routines. The world was alive, thriving, complex, beautiful. Sky had no concept of history or time. She didn't know that her species had existed for millions of years. She didn't know that pterosaurs had ruled the sky since before dinosaurs walked the earth, She didn't know that her ancestors had survived countless environmental changes, multiple mass extinctions, endless challenges. She just knew that right now, in this moment, she was flying. And it was perfect. After about 5 minutes of flight, Skye decided to attempt something more ambitious. She'd been maintaining altitude by using thermals and updrafts, passive flying, energy efficient, but not particularly exciting. Now she wanted to try what she'd seen the adults do, active soaring, gaining altitude through wing power alone, then diving in controlled descents, using the momentum to climb again. Skye angled her wings and began to climb. It was harder than she expected. Her wing muscles burned. The adults made it look effortless, but they had years of developed strength. She was still building that strength, but she persisted. Climb, climb, climb. The ocean fell away below. She could see the curvature of the coast now, stretching for miles in both directions. At what she estimated was about 300 feet altitude, the highest she'd ever been, Skye leveled off and looked around. The view was incredible. She could see everything, the entire coast, the forests inland, the ocean extending to the horizon. And then she noticed something strange. Far to the south, on the horizon, the sky looked different. There was a brightness there. Not the sun. The sun was to the east, climbing toward midday. This was something else. A glow, growing brighter. Skye watched it with curiosity. She'd never seen anything like it. Was it a storm? But it didn't look like storm clouds. It was more like the sky itself was lighting up. Other pterosaurs were beginning to notice too. Skye could hear calls from the colony behind her, uncertain calls, questioning calls. And then the brightness intensified, dramatically. The southern horizon erupted in light, not gradually, but instantly, as if someone had ignited the sky. 400 miles to the south, the Chicxulub asteroid had struck the Yucatan Peninsula. Skye didn't understand what she was seeing. Her brain, built for navigation and hunting and survival, had no framework for comprehending asteroids or extinction events or apocalypses. She just saw light. Beautiful, intense light. The sky turning from blue to white to gold. The colors were mesmerizing. More calls from the colony. These sounded different, alarmed, urgent. But Skye was young and curious. She'd never seen anything so beautiful. While the adults began diving back toward their nests, seeking shelter, Skye continued to watch. The light was getting brighter and warmer. Skye could feel heat on her face, even from 400 miles away. Below her, the ocean's surface began to ripple strangely. Animals were behaving oddly. A pod of prehistoric whales that had been swimming calmly suddenly dove deep. Fish schools scattered in all directions. Skye still didn't understand. To her, this was just an unusual natural phenomenon. Strange, yes, but not threatening. And then the shockwave arrived. It wasn't like wind. Wind you could adjust to, compensate for, ride. This was different. This was a physical wall of compressed air, traveling faster than sound, carrying the force of billions of atomic bombs. Skye heard it first, a roar like nothing in nature, like thunder, but continuous, like a waterfall, but angrier. She tried to turn, to fly back to the colony, suddenly understanding on some instinct level that this was danger. But she was too late. The shockwave hit her like a physical blow. Her wings were torn from their controlled position. Her body tumbled through the air. She spun, disoriented, unable to control her flight. For a terrifying moment, Skye was falling. Just falling. Wings useless. No control. The ocean rushing up. Every instinct she had screamed at her to extend her wings, catch air, glide. But the turbulence was too severe. Every time she tried to extend a wing, the violent air tore it back. She was going to die. Her first solo flight. her last solo flight. But then, whether through luck or some deeply ingrained survival reflex, Skye managed to catch a brief moment of less turbulent air. She extended both wings simultaneously, caught lift, pulled herself into a shallow glide instead of a death plunge. She was maybe 50 feet above the ocean surface, close enough to see individual waves, close enough to die if she miscalculated. But she didn't die. She pulled up, fighting the turbulence, using every bit of skill her parents had taught her, and some instinct she didn't know she possessed. And she climbed, away from the deadly ocean, back toward altitude. The shockwave passed. The turbulence decreased. Skye found herself flying again, shaky, terrified, but flying. She looked back toward the colony. The cliff was changed. Parts of it had collapsed. Several nests were simply gone, torn away by the shockwave. Pteranodon bodies, some living, some not, were scattered across the cliff face and beach below. Skye's mother was still there. Skye could see her, perched near their nest, wings extended in a protective stance over Skye's younger sibling, who wasn't ready to fly yet. Skye wanted to return, wanted the safety of the nest, wanted her mother. But something stopped her. Some instinct, some awareness that the nest wasn't safe anymore. Nowhere was safe. The sky to the south was no longer beautiful. It was terrifying. Dark. A massive cloud of debris was rising, spreading, blocking out the sun, and the heat was increasing. Even from 400 miles away, the thermal radiation from the impact site was making the air warmer by the minute. Skye made a decision, not a conscious, rational decision, but the kind of instant survival choice that evolution had programmed into her ancestors over millions of years. She flew north, away from the light, away from the heat, away from the growing darkness in the south. As she flew, the world below began to change. The calm ocean became turbulent. Massive waves, tsunamis triggered by the impact, were building, traveling outward in all directions. Skye watched one wave crash into the coast below. It was easily 100 feet tall. It swept inland for miles, consuming everything. The forests, the dinosaurs, the landscape itself. When the water receded, the coast was scoured clean. Nothing remained. Skye climbed higher, instinctively understanding that altitude was safety. The waves couldn't reach her in the air. She found a thermal current, weaker than normal because the heat distribution in the atmosphere was going chaotic, and rode it upward. From 500 feet altitude, Skye could see the scale of the catastrophe. The tsunami was destroying the entire coastline. Inland, forests were beginning to catch fire, ignited by superheated debris that was now falling from the sky like deadly rain. The sky itself was changing colors. The blue was being replaced by browns and grays as dust and debris from the impact site reached the upper atmosphere and began to spread. Skye flew for hours. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to keep flying, keep moving, keep surviving. Below her, the world was ending. Forests burned, oceans boiled. The ground itself seemed to be heaving. Volcanoes that had been dormant for millennia erupted, triggered by the seismic waves from the impact. And everywhere, animals were dying. Dinosaurs that had ruled the Earth for 165 million years were simply ceasing to exist. Some burned, some drowned. Some were crushed. Some simply stopped moving, their bodies unable to handle the sudden environmental stress. Skye's wings were exhausted. She'd been flying for maybe 3 hours, far longer than any previous flight. Her muscles screamed. Her body needed rest. But there was nowhere to land. The cliffs were gone or burning. The trees were on fire. The ground was covered in ash and debris. She kept flying. As the hours passed, the sky continued to darken. The sun, which should have been high overhead at midday, was barely visible through the thickening atmospheric debris. The temperature was fluctuating wildly, superheated areas where burning debris had fallen, cooling areas as the sun's light was increasingly blocked. Skye encountered other survivors, a few pterosaurs flying aimlessly, exhausted, some smaller flying creatures. Birds. Yes, birds existed then, small and primitive but present. None of them knew where to go. They just flew because landing meant death. Eventually, Skye's body reached its limit. She'd been flying for nearly 5 hours. Her wings were barely responding. She was dehydrated, exhausted, in shock. She had to land, had to rest, even if it killed her. Below, she spotted a small rocky island, maybe half a mile offshore. It was mostly bare rock, no vegetation to burn. The tsunamis had washed over it, but receded, leaving it wet but intact. Skye began her descent. It was sloppy, uncontrolled. She was too tired to execute a proper landing. She basically fell the last 20 feet, crashed onto the rocks, and lay there, wings spread, gasping. For several minutes, she just breathed. She was alive. Against all odds, against the end of the world, she was alive. But alive didn't mean safe. The sky was getting darker by the hour. The temperature was dropping. The air was becoming harder to breathe as ash and dust filled it. Skye pulled herself to a sheltered position between two rocks. It wasn't a nest. It wasn't safe. But it was something. She watched the sky continue to darken, watched fires burn on the distant coast, watched the few other flying survivors circle aimlessly, looking for somewhere to land. This was the impact winter beginning. The debris from the asteroid impact was spreading through the atmosphere, blocking out the sun. Temperatures would plummet. Plants would die. The entire food chain would collapse. But Skye didn't know any of that. She just knew she was cold, hungry, and alone. She waited through the night, though it was hard to tell when night began, since the sky was already so dark. She heard sounds from the mainland, explosions, collapses, the roars of dying dinosaurs. When something like morning came, though the sky barely lightened, Skye attempted to fly again. But she was too weak. She'd had no food since before her first flight the previous day. No water except what she'd licked from the rocks. She managed to get airborne, but couldn't maintain altitude. She landed back on the island, exhausted from even that small effort. Days passed. Skye survived by catching small fish that washed up on the rocks, dead or dying from the ocean's temperature fluctuations and toxic debris. She drank rainwater, acidic from the atmospheric pollution, but still water. Other pterosaurs landed on the island over those days. Some lived, many didn't. The island became a gathering place for survivors, not by choice but by necessity. Skye watched the world stay dark, watched the fires eventually burn themselves out as there was nothing left to burn, watched the ocean become gray and lifeless. She was 3 weeks into the post-impact world when she finally flew again. A real flight, not just a desperate glide. The sky was still dark, would remain dark for months, but her body had adapted somewhat. She'd found enough food to maintain herself. She flew over the coast. What had been lush forests and plains were now gray ash. Dead trees, bones, nothing living, nothing growing. The impact winter would last for years, maybe a decade. Most species would go extinct. The age of dinosaurs was over. But some survived. The small, the adaptable, the lucky. Skye returned to where the colony had been. The cliff was still there, altered but recognizable. The nests were gone. The other pterosaurs were gone. She called out anyway. A long, mournful cry. No answer came back. Skye lived for 2 more years in the post-impact world. It was a harsh existence. Food was scarce. The environment was hostile. The population of Pteranodon, once numbering in the hundreds of thousands, had been reduced to scattered survivors. She never saw her mother again, never saw her siblings, never returned to anything that felt like home. But she survived. And eventually, she mated, produced offspring, contributed to the species' desperate struggle to persist in a world that no longer wanted them. Pteranodon went extinct within 1 million years of the impact, a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. They'd survived for tens of millions of years, adapted to countless changes, but they couldn't adapt fast enough to this. Skye didn't live to see the species' final extinction. She died at age 2.5, relatively old for a post-impact pteranodon. She died in flight, the way every pteranodon wants to die, her exhausted heart simply stopping mid-glide. She fell into the ocean and was gone. But for one perfect moment, on the last beautiful morning before the world ended, Skye had flown for the first time alone, had felt freedom, had experienced joy. She couldn't have known that 15 minutes after her triumphant first flight, the world would end. That the most beautiful day of her life would also be the worst day in Earth's history. But maybe that's mercy. Maybe it's better not to know. Better to experience that perfect moment of joy without the shadow of what's coming. Because the truth is, and this is what Skye's story teaches us, we never really know what's coming. We never know if this beautiful moment is our last. If this perfect day is the final one. All we can do is fly when we can. Feel the wind, experience the freedom, appreciate the beauty. Because sometimes the most beautiful moments come right before the worst. And sometimes that has to be enough. Skye took her first solo flight on the last beautiful morning of the Cretaceous period. She flew with pure joy for exactly 15 minutes before the asteroid hit. Most creatures don't get even that much. Most never experience perfect freedom before the end comes. Skye got 15 minutes of pure flight, pure joy, pure life. And then she got 2 more years of survival in hell. She got to fight, to persist, to matter. Not bad for a creature whose first flight was supposed to be her death sentence. Not bad for someone who experienced the end of the world and still chose to keep flying. The sky was never more beautiful than it was that morning, and it would never be that beautiful again. Not for millions of years. Not until new species evolved. Not until the Earth healed. But for those 15 minutes, Skye owned that beautiful sky. She flew through it with joy and freedom and innocence, and no apocalypse, no matter how complete, could take that away from her. She had flown. She had been free. She had lived. And in the end, maybe that's all anyone can ask for. The sky was never more beautiful, and she was there to see it.